This section of Chapter 9 is all about talent. We're going to talk about the employee talent war and how corporate human resource departments are responsible for developing programs and policies that will attract, develop, motivate, and retain retail talent. And they have to do it better than the competition. So the first step in this really strategic process that HR professionals manage is how to develop talent. And this starts with the selection and training of talent. And we're going to touch on these here, and we're going to go a little deeper into them when we talk about the store management process in Chapter 16. But one thing to consider when hiring employees is that you should be very selective in who you hire to work for your retail establishment. There's a saying that one great employee is worth 3 good employees. So getting the right people in your retail establishment can have a big impact on your overall profit and performance. Selecting talent is more than just a job application and reading through a job application. But a lot of times retailers will have you go through phone interviews, group interviews, and personal interviews before you even get hired. Generally, when you're hired by a retailer, you will go through an orientation period or a little bit of a training period. And this is to get you up to speed on basic practices of the organization. What's really kind of an interesting story, I think, is Zappos. Zappos offers their employees around $4,000 to quit their job at the end of a 4-week orientation training period. Zappos goes through this 4-week training orientation period for all their new hires. And at the end, they ask, is this the right fit for you? If the employee says no, that person gets a $4,000 quitting bonus. Now, you think that sounds a little crazy. Why would you bring employees in, put them through a 4-week training, and just offer them $4,000 to leave? That money, it's actually much less of a loss for the company than if they spend a year or two really investing in that person and getting them up to speed with the company, and then that person not being an engaged employee. Zappos, this actually started at $1,000 or $100, and then in 2008 went up to $2,000, and now sits around $4,000. So kind of a cool thing that Zappos does to make sure that they are hiring those great employees and not just good employees. Now, only 1 to 2% of trainees take this offer every year. So a question for you is that enough? Or should Zappos be offering more to get rid of some of those good employees and make sure that they're keeping the great employees? So part of this training process, employees are much more invested in a retailer when that retailer takes an interest in them or makes an investment in them. So if you think about that, those productivity measures we looked at in the last set of slides, investing in our employees and making sure that we are training them to be the best employee they can be. A couple cool examples of how retailers are training their employees. REI actually takes all of their employees on a base camp orientation program. It's outdoors, and it puts them through numerous outdoor challenges and allows them to use a lot of the REI equipment that you'll find in the store. And REI is willing to spend the money on these employees to train them in this fashion because they truly feel that by training the employees and letting them use all the product in the store, letting them get to know how all the product works, it'll be more beneficial for the customers and the company in the long run because the employees will actually be able to say, yes, I have used that product and I can tell you about the product qualities and help you select what's best for you. Starbucks is another company that has an interesting training program. They actually have a leadership lab. And in that leadership lab, they invite their employees to come to that lab and they create problems for their employees to solve and give them the opportunity to really put their creative thinking skills to the test to be prepared for challenges they might face in the workspace. They also use this lab to demonstrate new products and sales techniques and really train their employees on the best techniques available. The company that I worked for PPG, every corporate employee actually works in one of our retail stores. And that really gives us the opportunity to day in, day out, see what happens in our retail store, to learn how to do what our store managers and our store associates are doing. Now, why do you think that that's beneficial? Well, that's beneficial because for someone who sits in a corporate retail office and does a lot of administrative tasks, but isn't as involved with the store management tasks, there can be a bit of a disconnect. So by having all of our administrative employees work in a store, we're able to kind of understand a little bit better what's happening in our stores and allows us to set better policies and programs. So training is very critical. And I'd like you in the discussion questions to talk about training programs you might have gone through with a retailer that you worked for, or see if you can find examples of unique training programs online that retailers offer their employees. Okay, the next step in the employee talent war, we've developed our talent, we've hired them, and we've trained them, and now we need to motivate them. And we need to align our employees' goals with our retail goals. Employees often have very different goals than what the retailer has. The employee is there to earn a paycheck, and the retailer is trying to make a profit. And so sometimes those goals don't align, and it's the goal of human resource management to coordinate and really align those goals. And there's three methods that HR professionals use to try to align the employee's goals with the retailer's goals. And the first is through written policies and supervision. And this is your basic HR policies that talk about attendance, that talk about sick days, personal days, vacation days, what your uniform should be, what the level of professionalism needs to be in the retail establishment. This is what's going to guide you through all of your diversity training and safety training and customer satisfaction training. So all of that is written down. These types of policies also go through store policies, such as hours the store is open, how to deal with customer complaints, how to deal with returns, how to work the cash register. All of those are in this section. A second way that HR professionals try to align their goals with the employees' goals is by creating incentives, benefits and incentives. A lot of those are compensation-based, and one way to motivate your employees is to offer them a commission, which is a percentage based on the sales they made, a percentage bonus based on the sales they made. The downside to offering commission, and we'll talk about this more in Chapter 16, commission, the risk is that if a competitor offers higher commission for the same type of selling product, you could lose that employee. So it's not the best way to keep your employees. You could also offer bonuses. That is a type of compensation benefit awarded periodically. Or you could also offer things like vacation time and extra days off. So all of those are incentives that you could offer employees to help align their goals with the retail goals. And the third way to really motivate your talent is to create an organizational culture. And an organizational culture is a set of values, traditions, and customs that guide employee behavior. Now, these values, traditions, and customs aren't necessarily written down. They're not formally documented. They're just really developed and maintained over the course of time at the retail establishment. And so this organizational culture might be that, meetings are very relaxed and it's perfectly acceptable to bring your snacks or a beverage in with you to a meeting. In other companies, the organizational culture might be more formal, where you cannot bring snacks, beverages, your cell phone into a professional meeting. The organizational culture could determine whether or not music is played in the office or in the break room of a retail store. So all of those are just values and traditions that are developed over time within a specific retail setting. So those are ways that retailers try to motivate talent. Now, how do we keep talent? How do we reduce our employee turnover? And we talked about early in this chapter just how important turnover is, because turnover reduces our sales and it increases our cost. And so we don't want a high turnover number. And we know that retail has a very high turnover rate compared to general numbers. Right? So we're at about 5% in the retail sector versus 3.3% in all business sectors. So let's talk about the cost to replace an employee. What happens if you do have an employee leave voluntarily? Well, the average cost to replace an employee is about 16% of their annual salary. So when we talk about an employee who makes $10 an hour, that employee is going to cost about $3,200 to replace. So 16% of their annual salary, and that's the cost it would take to do the job search, to onboard an employee, to train an employee, and the time it would cost to bring them up to speed on all the company policies and procedures. This number is actually higher if that employee makes more than $30,000 a year, and if the number is closer to 20% of their annual salary to replace them. So if you think about employees who make $55,000 each year, it would take $11,000 to replace that employee. So it's very expensive to replace employees. If Walmart were to replace 60% of their employees each year, let's think about the cost it would take to do that. So the example you have on your screen here, if we have a Walmart store, every Walmart store has on average 500 employees. And on average, these employees make about $10 an hour, which equates to an annual salary of around $20,000. So let's say that our turnover is 5% annually. So if we lose 25 employees every year for every Walmart store, what does that cost us? Well, if we take our $25 times that $3,200 that we calculated above, that costs every Walmart store in the country $80,000 every year. Now, we know from a previous lecture that Walmart has over 5,000 stores nationwide. So just think about the cost it would take each year, the cost that Walmart endures just due to employee turnover. It can be very expensive. So if Walmart replaces 60% of their low-wage employees, that would cost them over $1 billion every year. There's an interesting video, and I have the link posted on Georgia View in the module, and it discusses why retailers are really desperate to keep their least valuable workers. And so it goes through this chart that you see here from the Bureau of Labor Statistics. It talks about how retail and accommodation and food services companies really have that higher turnover rate and why it's so important to bring that number down. So a couple ways to keep our talent. Now that we know how much employee turnover costs companies every year, let's talk about ways we can keep talent in our retail establishment. There's a method of empowerment. And when we talk about empowerment, it's a process in which managers share power and decision-making authority with their employees. When employees have the authority to make decisions, they are much more confident in their abilities, and they're much more committed to the success of the retailers. So a couple ways to really empower your employees. Think of things like if you work at a restaurant and you take a dish out to a customer and they say, "Oh no, that's wrong." There are some restaurants that would say, well, it's the employee's fault for writing the order down wrong, and so we're going to take the cost of that meal out of their paycheck. And there are other restaurants that say, that's okay, it's not a problem, return it to the back, remake the sandwich, and take it out to the customer. No cost to you, it's a cost to the restaurant. Which employee feels more empowered? Which employee would be more likely to stay? Well, it's the employee that's able to remake the sandwich. They have the authority and the power to remake that sandwich. Another way to empower your employees is to enable them to accept returns. We talked in customer service how it's important to try to minimize the number of people that the customer has to talk to when they're going through a customer service process. There are some places where you have to call a manager in a retail setting if the return is more than $10 in value and get a management code. Now, that sales associate is not empowered to return that item for the customer, but by allowing them to make it returns without calling a manager, you're empowering them to do so. An example of empowerment that I think is really neat at Target, sales associates are allowed to make discounts at the cash register of 5%. So let's say you have a shirt that has a button missing, or I actually had a personal example of this where I bought Christmas ornaments. They were a set of 12, but 2 of them were broken, but I really wanted these ornaments. And so when I asked the cashier, if there's anything she could do, she said, absolutely, I can take 5% off, no problem. And so she didn't have to call a manager to do that. She was empowered to make that decision to take 5% off my purchase. I was happy because I got 5% off, and I didn't have to wait long while they made that decision process. And that was really a sense of empowerment. And so employees who are empowered are much more likely to stay at a retailer than employees who are not empowered. Another way to keep talent, to retain talent, is through employee engagement. So we talked about this engagement at the very beginning of this chapter, but there's a lot of ways that employers work to engage their employees. And one of those ways is to reduce status differences. A lot of companies are doing things like Jeans Day Friday, and everyone from the CEO to the stockroom employees wear blue jeans, and so it reduces that status difference. A lot of retailers try to put their employees on a first name basis with the management staff to, again, kind of bring everybody to the same level. Companies work to promote from within, and this shows the commitment of the retailer to training their employees, and it establishes a sense of fairness because it confirms that our employees are doing a good job and deserve to be promoted and move up in the company. Some employees work to provide a work-life balance. Two-income households have become the standard in the United States, and single-parent households are growing. But it's very difficult to juggle life and work, and it's important for employers to recognize this. And offering work-life balance perks can be very expensive for a retailer or any company for that matter. But that expense, again, is usually less than losing your good employees. So retailers are starting to offer options like flex time and job sharing now to help engage their employees and make them feel like the employee cares about them, the employer cares about them. Employees are providing benefits, and it's no longer just health, dental, vision, and retirement benefits, but it's benefits like on-site childcare, on-site fitness facilities, maybe it's off-site fitness facilities. It could be a cafeteria is a benefit that employers offer, and providing benefits does engage your employees. And other retailers are using social media. Retailers are spread out globally, so social media helps communicate. There are companies that have HR Twitter accounts, and they are specifically for employees of that company to be updated on the latest information. So there's lots of ways that retailers are trying to use social media to engage their employees. There is a video posted in this module on a company called SAS, and SAS has been voted the #1 company to work for many years just because of the way that they go about engaging their employees and retaining talent at the company. So I'd like to encourage you to watch that video and just see what they're doing. I'd also encourage you to look and see if you can find other companies who offer ways of engaging and empowering their employees in an effort to retain them at the company. That's what we're covering from Chapter 9, which is our overall HR management. We're going to go next into Chapter 16 and start applying some of these strategies to our individual retail establishments.